Whoa, look who entered the room and silenced every ego. The entire crew circling your opponent went motionless, as if someone had pressed a cosmic mute button. Look who delivered a blow so clean, precise, and surgical. Greetings, you silent troublemaker. Calm down, detonator. You are a quiet power that doesn't utilize theatrics, raise its voice, or swing its fists, since your mind's accuracy does the damage for you. They weren't embarrassed by you. They didn't make fun of them. They weren't even your target. With one precise move, you just pierced their ego. And all of the viewers are suddenly doubting the hierarchy they once swore to uphold. They are unable to breathe in the same manner. They are unable to communicate in the same manner. You didn't just win, so they can't even look at the guy they used to regard as an unbeatable authority. They were unprepared for the mental checkmate you executed. They were unaware that you were playing on the board when you flipped it. They find it even more alarming because of how it happened. Quiet, subtle, and seamless. They're still sitting there going over the incident again and again, analyzing your tone and reliving what you said in an attempt to figure out how someone they much underestimated was able to get past all of their psychological defenses. They believed they were interacting with a predictable person. Believed the person they were dealing with was manageable. They believed they had you labeled, categorized, and neatly stored in a mental drawer they could access whenever they felt superior. Then you hit. Not impulsively, emotionally, or wildly. You struck with an accuracy that can only be attained by someone who calmly, painstakingly, and almost clinically examines people. Let's discuss that time when everything changed. The silence, the thickening of the air, the subtle change in energy that only those who were sensitive noticed, not the part where you spoke or did anything, because that was the real start of their demise. You weren't responding, you were doing calculations. Every time they believed they had the upper hand, you could see how their ego grew. Every time they thought you were unaware of the sarcasm concealed behind their tone, their confidence grew. How? Like a pack, relying on the alpha to bark on their behalf, their friends and crew cheered silently behind them. They thought you had given up when you remained silent. They thought you were weak because you were calm. They thought you were afraid because of your constraint. They were unaware that you were more accurately charting the psychological battlefield than they had ever charted their own fears. They failed to realize that individuals like you are emotionally immobile. You depart from strategy. They only see the square they are seated on, but you view the entire board. You allow them to boast. You allow them to boast. Since you already knew the move that would bring down everything they had created, you allowed them to perform, and you didn't think twice when the time came. You didn't falter. You didn't ask questions. Their ego burst like a balloon hitting a needle when you made just one comment, one move, and one precisely timed stroke of psychological insight. Their entire team is currently silent because of this. It's not a fear of you. I'm afraid of what you disclosed, because you did more than simply expose the leader when you punctured that ego. The entire ecology that relied on that leader's delusion of power was revealed by you. Demonstrated to them the frailty of the hierarchy, the childishness of the theatrics, and the fact that everything, the posturing, the bravado, the subtle jabs, was nothing more than a precarious tower based on a single insecurity that they hoped no one would ever point out. You didn't even point at it. It was pierced by you. They're currently in a spiral as they strive to understand what the hell went wrong. They have the loudest possible. Their pride was damaged. Their internal narratives are frantically trying to make sense of the abrupt change in power. They are asking themselves embarrassing questions such, how did we miss that? How did they get so sharp? What else have they observed? Have they been reading us all the entire time? You were always capable of this, which is the reality that they are frantically attempting to avoid choking on. This degree of psychological clarity was something you've always possessed. You've always been able to analyze a situation from the inside out without ever drawing attention to yourself. You aren't the issue. The version of you that they created in their heads, the one that suited them and maintained their inflated ego, was the issue. They imposed simplicity on a complicated person. They projected vulnerability onto a bystander. They project ability onto a person who is silently piecing together reality, one deduction at a time. Their crew is now silent because of this. Because when confidence crumbles, the only language left is silence. The leader's mental checkmate isn't the only reason they're silent. They recognized how easily any of them could have been the culprit, which is why they are silent. The hierarchy they depended on was revealed to be a house of cards, which is why they are silent. They are silent because they saw something uncommon, accuracy that doesn't draw attention to itself. You struck without being ostentatious, without raising your voice, and without losing your composure. You struck without attacking anyone. It targeted the myth that sustained their entire social order. They will always get this portion wrong, so let me tell you what really transpired beneath the surface. They'll believe you're brave. They'll believe you lost your temper. They will believe that you have finally retaliated. However, the reality is more hazardous, cleaner, and colder. You didn't snap. You didn't take revenge. You made no attempt to prevail. You just went with the truth instead of drama. And when someone who can see through illusions speaks the truth, it might be fatal. This is the source of their fear, not the actual moment, but what it makes clear, that you can attack with accuracy at any moment and they won't be able to predict it, that you are able to decipher their unconscious motivations, at trends they believed were too subtle to notice can be examined, that you are able to predict movements before they even consider making them. The discovery that the quiet person was the true tactician all along is what scares them. They weren't publicly humiliated by you. It's much worse that you caused them to question themselves in private. Let's now discuss the underlying dynamic. The ego of their leader was more than merely a characteristic. It served as the binding agent for the group's self-assurance. To establish the tone, they relied on that ego. They relied on that ego to speak for them. They concealed their own fears behind that ego. However, everything behind it became visible when you perforated it exactly and cleanly. And it wasn't strength that supported it. It wasn't dominance. It had nothing to do with superiority. It was fragility, dread, and exaggerated confidence backed by dubious percents. They respect you, which is why their staff isn't quiet. They acknowledge themselves in the breakdown, which is why they are silent. They are realizing that none of them are safe if one ego can be destroyed with a single move. They are observing that the individual who made the most noise in the room was also the most manageable. They are realizing that their entire social structure is a pyramid constructed of insecurity masquerading as authority. The leader wasn't just overthrown by you. You revealed the non-existent basis. Here's the true genius. You didn't succeed by attempting to control others. You accomplished this by declining to act out the part they gave you. They rely on consistency. They rely on you responding as they anticipate. They rely on you responding as they anticipate. They rely on you remaining in the role they have imagined for you. However, you moved without warning, gently and neatly. Furthermore, that change did not lead to hostility. It was in the direction of the quieting. The one thing that a bloated ego cannot endure is clarity. They are still paralyzed and mentally reliving the scenario because of this. They are unable to classify what has just occurred. You are no longer easily labeled by them. They are unable to reduce you to a standard response pattern. You've turned into an unidentified variable. Furthermore, the most hazardous element in every group dynamic is the unknown variable. They have no idea what you are capable of. How much you see is unknown to them. They have no idea how long you've been studying them. They're being eaten alive by the idea that you've always been 3 steps ahead. Let's examine the psychology of the ego you pierced in more detail. Ego feeds on delusion. It requires a viewership. It needs believers. It requires reactions from people like as submission, terror, and affirmation. You starved it when you refused to feed it and reacted with logic rather than feeling. You didn't rinse, you took it apart. Precision cannot endure a brittle ego. Accuracy is beyond its capabilities. It is not able to withstand exposure. Chaos is what it needs to hide in. You also refrained from causing disruption. The sharpest tool a mind like yours can use is clarity, which you provided it. The fallout is now developing precisely as anticipated. They are thinking about nothing else and acting as if nothing had happened. They are coming up with mental justification that help them feel less hopeless. To preserve their pride, they are rewriting the event in their minds. You got lucky, is what they're telling themselves, as though luck could match your level of accuracy. Beneath all of their internal chatter, though, lies the reality that they would never publicly admit. You saw them clearly, and they were unable to deal with the mirror. Watch what transpires next. Their crew will begin to exhibit new behaviors. Micro shifts and apprehensive pauses in their speech when they are around you. Longer pauses, softer reactions, avoidance of direct confrontation, and a subtle respect they'll never admit openly. Because someone can never completely trust a facade again after witnessing how quickly it falls apart. Your action permanently changed the balance of power rather than putting an end to a dispute. They sense it. Everyone in the audience senses it. You sense it. The fact that the shift wasn't audible is another frightening aspect for them. It wasn't overly dramatic. They couldn't deconstruct or study it as some explosive spectacle. It was surgical, silent, and immaculate. A single psychological cut that altered the whole environment without causing any obvious damage. They are disturbed by the lack of pandemonium because they are familiar with chaos. They are afraid of precision. You did more than merely pierce someone's ego. You changed the group's overall gravitational pull. The sun they revolved around used to be their leader. The orbit is glitching now. There is a problem with their internal map. They used to think of that leader as untouchable, but now they see him as flawed, human, and vulnerable. And when people learn that their sun can burn out, what do? They search for a new center of gravity. They begin looking around the room for the person who used actual force-controlled, quiet force. The kind of energy that announces itself without a stage. Their instincts are therefore portraying them while they attempt to act as though nothing has changed. Their inclinations are shifting in your direction. Pay close attention. Before they say anything, their eyes will reveal everything. Someone who once regarded you as superior will now turn away. A person who once grinned at you will now adjust their jaw as if something were trapped there. Someone who used to cut you off in the middle of your sentence will now wait for you to complete. They have no idea why they are acting in this way. They simply sense the increased stress in the atmosphere. The hierarchy's tension is constantly shifting. They are able to distinguish between quiet competence and screaming ego. They sense the weight of a mind capable of dismantling illusions without speaking up. You did not simply defeat someone. You did not you. And the one enemy that no ego can overcome is reality. Despite their best efforts to conceal it, their leader is the one who is disintegrating the fastest. Your wounded ego is not like a balloon that bursts and then vanishes. It resembles a cracked mirror more. They no longer want to acknowledge the version of themselves that appears in every look they give themselves. They experience an inward sense of exposure rather than a public one. And because panic now drives their entire performance, that internal exposure is even more damaging. Subconsciously, the crew is already sensing the leader's instability, even though they may not completely comprehend it yet. The microfractures are being sensed by them. They're feeling like they're losing control. They sense that the person they followed was untested and not unshakable. When someone who has never faced a difficulty is eventually confronted, they are unsure of how to react. They're not accustomed to recalibrating. They are not accustomed to contemplation. They're not accustomed to being modest. They rely on outside reinforcement for their entire identity, and their internal reality begins to fall apart when that reinforcement fails. They are currently experiencing that. Although it doesn't seem loud, their demise is unavoidable, and whether they realize it or not, their doom is preparing for impact. This is where the checkmate becomes much more destructive. You didn't make an emotional move. It struck so hard because of this. and passionate outburst encourages reprisals. However, people are terrified of a precise, measured, and clean strike that is given from a place of complete clarity because they know they cannot foresee someone who thinks rather than reacts. They can predict someone who is upset. They are unable to predict a perceptive one. They are able to gauge volume. Silence cannot be measured by them. They are unable to defend against strategy, but they can prepare for chaos. The room was rewired by your silence prior to the checkmate, your composure during it, and your stillness following it. You showed self-control. This implies that you are in charge of the circumstance. Their leader never possessed that. It was a show of supremacy. It's structural. Although they do not yet fully comprehend the difference, the crew is beginning to notice it. They are coming to the realization that they have been acting under a false pretense of authority all along. And whether you like it or not, the psychological gravity is moving in your direction now that the illusion is gone. When someone's ego has been carefully analyzed, a certain kind of silence descends upon the room. It's not the silence of terror, it's the silence of adjustment. Despite the destruction of the blueprint they relied on, people are attempting to reconstruct their understanding of the hierarchy. They are unsure of where to put themselves. They are unsure of where to put their leader. They have no idea where to put you. And the most potent edge you currently have is that ambiguity. Opportunities arise from uncertainty. Space is created by uncertainty. Space is created by uncertainty. Additionally, people start to recognize your genuine range when they begin to see you without their preconceived notions. Though modest, the change is unavoidable. They begin to react differently to your presence. When they are with you, they begin to change their tone. They begin to control their responses. They begin to provide you with an unseen barrier of respect. The reasons behind their actions are not entirely clear to them. The decision is made by instinct before reason can catch up. They have an instinct that says, be careful with this one. They're not like us. They're not breakable like we assumed. Once that instinct takes over, it never completely goes away. Something else, something deeper, was accomplished by your accuracy. It revealed who among the staff was devoted solely to the illusion and who was strong enough to face the truth. Because their responses fell into two categories as soon as the illusion broke, some were so shocked that they fell silent. Out of panic, some became silent. Some fell silent out of deference. Some stopped speaking because they were unsure of their stance on history. And only a small percentage of people stopped talking because they understood what you had done. They were the ones who actually noticed the change. They were the ones who actually noticed the change with comprehension rather than fear. They are fully aware of what you did. They are fully aware of how you accomplished it. And they are fully aware of why it was successful. They also secretly admire it. The previously cohesive crew is now divided internally in ways they won't publicly admit. There's a silent fracture developing. It was brought on by the abrupt awareness that the authority they depended on was no longer the most capable person in the room, not by drama or conflict. When someone exhibits greater clarity, a group that is based on dominance disintegrates. You set off that. They are silent because of this. They are uneasy because of this. The energy feels different now because of this. The checkmate was more than just the conclusion of a conflict. It marked the start of a reconstruction. Everyone is now compelled to reconstruct their perception of you based on indisputable facts rather than preconceived notions. They observed how you managed the circumstance. They witnessed how you used one deft maneuver to demolish the leader's ego. Without you speaking up, they could see how the whole dynamic changed. Reputations are suddenly rewritten by such an event. Additionally, the rewrite is permanent rather than temporary. Their leader will make an effort to get better, but it will be a desperate rather than a confident effort. They are going to overcompensate. They will make great gestures, appear stronger, and speak louder in an attempt to reclaim control, but none of it will be successful. The Emperor's armor never appears complete again after people notice that it has cracks. Furthermore, it becomes increasingly clear that the leader's reputation was always brittle the more they attempt to repair it. They weren't broken by you. What was already broken was revealed by you. That type of harm is irreparable. This is the part that sets the stage for the rest of the story. Your action did more than simply change the hierarchy, it changed the story. The former leader is no longer on people's minds. What you just showed them is on their minds. They are reflecting on how someone they disregarded carried out a mental blow that was so accurate it silenced a whole social structure. They're considering your potential. They're considering how long you've been able to see right through them. They are considering how long you've been able to see right through them. They are considering how many of their fears you are already aware of. They are considering the potential risk of a silent mind when it does decide to take action. And this is where the true psychological storm starts, not at the actual collision, but rather in the aftermath, when their fantasies get out of hand. Because when someone witnesses you piercing someone's ego with such accuracy, their imagination begins to construct whole scenarios of what else you might be able to destroy. They start speculating about potential outcomes, and fantasy is far scarier than reality. It uses things you haven't even done yet to fill in the holes. Because the proof of your talent is indisputable, it produces threats that don't exist, but feel genuine. That's the kind of fear that never goes away. It intensifies. The awareness that every encounter the leader's team has ever had with you may have been watched, processed, stored, and comprehended at a level beyond their comprehension traps them in a new form of awareness. They are repeating every joke, slight, sidelong glance, and attempt at superiority. They are wondering which moment disclosed a vulnerability, which moment exposed something they believed they were concealing, or which moment gave them away. They're not merely scared of what you did. The idea that you might have seen everything before they scares them. That's the portion that makes it impossible for them to stand straight around you. Their leader was not attacked by you. You assaulted their delusion of security. Furthermore, an unstable ally is an unsafe thinker. Observe how their interpersonal communication has decreased. You never made them a target, but they're afraid of being the next. The irony is that, because the accuracy you used wasn't arbitrary, they are afraid of something you never threatened. It was deliberate, it had a target, it worked well. It was the clarity of a mind that has mastered control, rather than the turmoil of a mind losing control. Now that they are aware of this, their internal social contracts are changing. Some of them will start to disassociate themselves from their leader, initially in a quiet and subtle manner. They will begin to lose the eternal loyalty they boasted about. Physically, they may still be standing next to their leader, but mentally they are moving away, reassessing and recalculating. Before your move, they would never have considered the concerns they are starting to ask themselves. Have we been following the wrong person? Was this classification based on confidence or true strength? What does it say about the person we've been defending if someone like you can break the illusion with such ease? Though they will never be voiced out loud, these questions will be felt deeply, continuously, and strongly enough to undermine their cohesiveness. A checkmate does that. Not only does it end the current game, but it also casts doubt on the next one before it even starts. Meanwhile, their leader will try to piece the story back together. They'll make an effort to act as if nothing has changed, as if your precise strike was an error, a tiny aberration, or a fluke. They'll make their voice sound confident. They will pretend to be dominant. In an attempt to get their workforce back in line, they will display the same old facial expressions. However, the performance energy will be incorrect, too tight, too forced, and too nervous. The instant the audience loses faith in the performer and is no longer persuaded, the performance fails. The leader will speak more quickly than normal, as if they are racing through their own ideas before losing confidence. You'll see people going into excessive detail about topics they used to discuss casually. You'll see their eyes flashing, their focus breaking, and the borders of their confidence cracking. These don't indicate healing. These are indications that someone is attempting to use a flash of insight to get out of the psychological trap you put them in. The more profound reality is that they are unable to escape. Honesty does not regenerate ego. Denial causes the ego to regenerate. However, your attack prevented denial, at least temporarily. This is sensed by their crew, and because they are aware of it, they start modifying their behavior in ways that benefit you without your involvement. Around you, they become more circumspect, deliberate, and considerate. Not out of compassion, but rather from an innate inclination triggered by seeing unavoidable precision. Humans are strong fighters. People are able to withstand hostility, but they are disarmed by precision. Accuracy enters the bloodstream. Precision appeals straight to their survival instinct and gets over their defenses. Because you did harm, you are not a threat. Because you created clarity, you pose a threat. And illusions based on ego are destroyed by clarity. The social landscape will continue to change throughout the course of the next several interactions. Someone who used to make fun of you will now refrain from doing so. Someone who once attempted to outdo you will suddenly run out of things to say. When someone who once spoke over you tries to do the same, you'll notice that their voice cracks. These don't happen by accident. These are recalibrations of the nervous, because they now see you as someone who might suddenly bring psychological harm. Their thoughts are instructing them to be cautious around you. They are not afraid of your rage, they are afraid of your thoughts. Your new place in the hierarchy is solidified by that distinction. You only showed where everyone really stood. You didn't climb or force anyone down. You discovered what was already true but concealed under pretense, loudness, and ego. They find the transition strange because of this. Their story wasn't meant to be this way. However, stories fail when they come into contact with reality, and everyone was compelled to rethink their conception of the social order as a result of the ruthless clarity with which you presented reality. The checkmate did not mean the end. It served as an introduction. This leads us straight to the following point. The awakening, not the fall. The ripple, not the aftermath. Not their crew's silence, but the change that was tied with the Twitter of the or the because as a hierarchy collapses, a new story starts to emerge in the background, and that story is already beginning to take shape all around you. They are still unsure about its meaning. They have no idea where it will take them. They are unable to comprehend the person you have shown yourselves to be. However, they will, and the realization won't come easily. It will strike them gradually at first, like a reduction in air pressure, and then forcefully, like an unavoidable fact. Because you will never be able to look at someone the same way again once they do a clean, deliberate, precision-based ego puncture, the kind that completely transforms a room. They can never be categorized with outdated labels. It is never safe to undervalue them. They have previously shown that they can cut through illusion with a single deliberate movement. So you can never rely on illusions. This is where the true change starts, not in you, but in them. They'll start researching you without acknowledging it. Your silence will be examined by them. Your tone will be misunderstood by them. They will observe how you sit, breathe, react, and remain silent. They won't do it out of desire, but rather instinct, because the unconscious mind looks for new points of reference when the ego is pierced. It looks for confiscation. It looks for comprehension. However, you won't provide them with steadiness. Because they previously believed they had you figured out, they will find unpredictability, and their inner compass was destroyed by the fact that they were dead incorrect. They discovered that you had been 10 moves ahead the entire time, not only that you had executed a checkmate, and that's what scares them. The leader you deliberately and mentally demolished will try to get better. However, if the collapse wasn't an accident, rehabilitation is difficult. Instead of being bruised, their ego was exposed. There's a distinction. An exposure lasts longer than a bruise. It changes. It turns into paranoia through metabolism. Now they'll enter every room and worry whether you're going to do it again. Every word they say around you will be questioned. They will foresee dangers from non-existent angles. They will attempt to persuade themselves that the situation wasn't as terrible as it seemed. However, they are betrayed by their house. Their people witnessed the events. The change was felt by their people. The collapse was reported by their residents. Their people are currently observing you with a careful curiosity that verges on veneration rather than fear or admiration, because the ability to silence a room without raising one's voice is a type of authority that can only be displayed rather than taught or inherited. And you made it clear just when the leader's ego went too far into hallucination. Let's discuss the internal discussions that are currently taking place and that they will never express. Their crew is questioning whether they were always connected with the wrong force. They're questioning whether their allegiance was a mistake. They want to know how many times your imagination foresaw events that they didn't anticipate. They're wondering how long you've been able to move among them with the kind of mental acuity that, should the need arise, could destroy their entire structure. They want to know why they were unaware of it earlier. The ego always feels dumb when reality shows up out of the blue, yet they will feel foolish for that part. Something far more fascinating is about to start. The hierarchy is disintegrating, not simply shattered. It is slowly erasing itself, thinning at the edges and splitting inside. But instead of disintegrating with turmoil, it is disintegrating with silence. The kind of silence that follows an unquestionable truth. The kind of quiet that stifles any effort to restore the illusion. The kind of quiet that causes everyone to become acutely aware of what is not being uttered. Now the silence is your presence. Now your tactic is to remain silent. The quiet now is your accuracy. They will sense the stillness before they see you each time you enter the room. They will detect the change in air pressure in the same manner that they did just moments prior to the checkmate. Trauma leaves a lasting impression. Even if their thoughts want to forget the moment, their bodies will still remember it. The best aspect is that you don't need to repeat your reign. To stay powerful, people like them depend on repetition. They require continual loudness, displays, and reminders of their power. However, you rose through accuracy rather than performance. Multiple demonstrations are not necessary for accuracy. One is sufficient. One deft jab, one revelation of insecurity, one display of cognitive accuracy so acute it distorted their perception. They're silent now because of their awareness of you, not because you silenced them. Let's examine their psyche in more detail. The main element tying their group's story together was their leader's ego. When the threat is removed, the story falls apart. The unraveling has already started, regardless of the leader's efforts to strengthen, patch, or glue it back together. They will make an effort to restore control, but it will appear forced, fragile, and almost theatrical. They will speak a little louder than is necessary. They will attempt to make jokes that are no longer funny. When crew members hesitate too long, they will glare at them. They will overreact, overcorrect, and overcompensate. Because people attempt to create the illusion more forcefully when they are aware that it is dying. However, the staff is no longer buying it, not after what they saw. You gave a checkmate that has a lasting psychological impact. It adheres, it haunts, it plays again. Precision cannot be disputed, as contrast to disagreements, insults, or emotional outbursts that can be explained away. Because precision is based on truth, it is the antithesis of ego. Furthermore, the ego is more afraid of the truth than it is of being attacked. This is the element of your new role that you must comprehend. You are not taking the place of the leader. You're not going to take over as the new authority. As an independent variable in a system that relies on predictability, you are turning into something much more unstable. You are no longer a part of their hierarchy. You exist outside of it, above it, and parallel to it. They are unable to classify you. They are unable to classify you. They are unable to predict you. You cannot be dismissed by them. They can't challenge you without running the risk of collapsing again. It's safe to confront someone who makes noise. It is suicidal to challenge someone, whether they realize it or not. They are aware of that now. Additionally, the signs are visible everywhere. Individuals will approach you in different ways. Some people will carefully test limits in order to gauge the extent of your clarity. Some will not put you to the test at all, treating you more like a hazardous truth than a dangerous individual. Some will want to approach you in the hopes that being near you will allow them to gain access to the insight you've shown. They will want to understand you because they want to feel comfortable again, not because they are inquisitive. However, you don't provide safety. You disassembled safety. You exposed safety as a delusion sustained by confidence based on ego. They are still unable to breathe normally around you because of this. Let's talk about the leader once more. Their demise is still in progress. They are battling identity breakdown rather than merely embarrassment. The appearance of intellectual superiority was the foundation of their entire identity. Then you came and dissolved it with a single stroke. A persona that depends on unproven superiority is incapable of withstanding testing. It cracks right away, and it leaks insecurity everywhere once it's cracked. They'll start looking at you more frequently, anticipating another blow. They'll take it as a message each time you change your expression. Every quiet moment will be perceived as condemnation. It will feel like strategy every time you move calmly. They can no longer avoid the mirror that you have become. What they pretend not to see is reflected in the mirror. This is where the next stage begins. The team will start focusing on the silence surrounding you rather than the leader. You demonstrate expertise without theatrics, not because you're loud or intimidating. Furthermore, skill without showmanship is captivating. It draws attention. It raises consciousness. Loyalty is drawn to it in subtle, unconscious ways. You earn gravity, not loyalty. And whether it wants to or not, gravity pulls. The crew will eventually start making small changes to their social affiliation. They will talk to you more intently. They will submit to your interpretations. They won't establish their own opinions until they see how you respond. They won't acknowledge that they are afraid of you. The change in hierarchy that is taking place beneath their feet will not be acknowledged. However, they will act in ways that support it. Power is revealed rather than asserted, and your revelation has already taken place. Your checkmate was an induction rather than a conclusion. Induction into a new mental category. People who perceive what others overlook, attack without warning, and destroy egos without touching them fall into this category. They are most unstable because of this, is certain. They are unable to prepare for accuracy, but they may prepare for anger. What will happen next, then, is the question. After the quiet, what happens? After the recalibration, what happens? What occurs when a group attempts to operate under the strain of an unstated change in hierarchy? The solution is straightforward. They break. Not in an explosive manner, not in a big way, not in public. They break silently from the inside in 3 different ways. People who are afraid of clarity will turn away from their leader because they want stability, but they won't come to you. They will just separate. Someone whose ego is so easily pierced has lost their trust. People who are aware of clarity will start unconsciously imitating your actions. They'll take up your composure. They'll mimic your quiet. Instead of responding, they will take clues from the way you watch. The person whose intellect has proven itself will be followed. Because they have no identity without the illusion, those who relied on it will adhere tenaciously to the leader. To conceal the reality that the person they depend on is failing, they will become louder, more defensive, and more reactive. These fractures are the result of your accuracy. These fractures were accelerated by your checkmate. Every time you enter the room, your presence exacerbates these cracks. The last truth is the part they will always feel, but will never acknowledge. Once you witness someone's breakdown, it cannot be undone. A leader whose ego was precisely wounded would never appear strong again, and a mind that made that puncture is remembered forever. Your action changed the room's mythology in addition to the moment. You became the one factor that everyone had to account for. They can no longer afford to undervalue your intelligence. They will always remember you as the checkmate they never anticipated. And one truth emerges above everything else as the rift deepens, the story changes, and the stillness intensifies. You did not simply prevail. The entire game was redefined by you. The question that now plagues them is the same one that will lead us to the ultimate realization. What would happen if you ever chose to puncture an ego with such accuracy again? Since they are aware of the solution, they simply don't want to express it.